We've got a special guest today. Washington's play-by-play announcer Tony Castricone is with us.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Tomashoff. That's not Lars Hanson. That's Tony Castricone. Tony, welcome to the show. Great to have you here. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. All right, Tony, it's great to have you here. We're going to have a lot of fun today. And so right off the bat, we like to jump into things here on Locked On Huskies. What has impressed you most about Kalen DeBoer and this Washington Huskies football team in 2023?
Well, thanks for having me. I think the thing that's impressed me most this year, what impressed me most in general was the culture that he was able to successfully build, because everybody knows that's important. Not everybody can do it. It's really hard. What has impressed me most this year might sound super vanilla and simple, but it's just the fact they're 9-0. Like you'll hear Coach DeBoer say, winning college football games is hard. And I don't care if that's against Tulsa. I don't care if that's against whoever. They've done it. You know, they've gone 9-0, and the Arizona State game left some things to be desired. Stanford game left some things to be desired, and yet they still got those wins. And, you know, even that Tulsa game in week 2, you know, they won by 33 points, but I think everybody left the stadium being like, well, wish they would have won by 50, you know, I wish they wouldn't have had that fumble or whatever. The standards are extraordinarily high, and yet this team has one standard, and it's to win. And they got to show up and do that week after week, and they have done that. And so, I mean, you know, I think that's probably not even right, if I'm being honest. I mean, I think they have a standard to win a certain way. And you heard Ryan Grubb in his press conference this week, or no, that was actually on KJR. He was doing an interview with Softy, where he said, you know, Michael Penix only had 2 plays last week where he graded a minus, and one of them was on a touchdown. It's like, that's tough grading when you give somebody a minus for the way they scored a touchdown. But, you know, that is the standard that they have. And the point of the standard, I should say, is to go 1-0 every week. And so they've done that 9 times. Now, hopefully, they'll try to do it 6 more.
Absolutely. And the more the better, right? I really like your point there, especially about leaving. It feels like it's something that a lot of players, especially on offense, have talked about this season, is leaving meat on the bone. Where you talk about that Tulsa game where, yeah, it felt like they could have won by 50. There have been so many instances of that this season where it's like, wow, yeah, this team still feels like it has a long way to go. And we look at, as we record this on Tuesday afternoon, giving everybody a little peek behind the curtain of what we do here, before the college football playoff rankings have been released. And we don't know where they're going to sit. Probably do a live show reaction. Lars and I will at some point to give a little bit more of a reaction to that. But it kind of feels like this team has been so impressive, especially on the offensive side all season long, where there's some questions defensively. But even despite those questions, whenever they need to step up and make a play, they've done that every single time. And I feel like a lot of that comes from just the culture that you talked about and just everything that Kalen DeBoer has infused into this program in less than 2 seasons. And it's truly remarkable to just kind of see everything that he's done and the way that this program has turned around in such a short period of time.
Yeah, I mean, the way I think about it in life is nothing's ever guaranteed. So everything you do is with the idea in mind of maximizing chances that things go well, because there are no guarantees, right? And so you do things with the belief and the trust that doing that thing will maximize the chances that things go in your favor. And so, you know, that 1-0 mindset does apply to, like, hey, we can't look ahead to the Apple Cup or whatever because we got a game to worry about this week. And that's true, but it also applies to literally every moment of every day. They're just trying to be present in the moment, squeeze the most juice out of that moment. And that comes down to preparation. I mean, this team is so unbelievably prepared. Some of the plays that we've seen have been plays that were executed, like that really cool reverse to Jeremy Bernard where Michael Penix got the key block last week to spring him. That comes down to preparation, right? And preparation and how focused you are on preparation often comes down to how motivated you can get yourself to be for some of the boring minutia that goes into trying to be great. And so that's where culture comes through. Coach said the best teams he's ever had have been the player-led ones. And this is a player-led team where they don't want to let their brothers down, right?
Right.
Zion Tupuola-Fatui lost his father and then chose to play because he didn't want to let his brothers down. Now, we can talk about, was that the right play call on 3rd and 3, or we can nitpick like, oh, they turned the ball. I just think at the end of the day, this team has a connectedness, has an all-in that comes down to something that's just rare. You just don't find it very many places, and that's why I think they're going to maximize their potential. Now, what is that? Is that a national championship? Is that a CFP berth? I don't know. And on top of that, you're dealing with a sport in college football where crazy things happen all the time, because if you ran the simulation 100 times, Washington might beat Arizona State by 50 in 40 of those 100 simulations. But the only one that we get to see is the one that happened that night, right? So I think it's really easy to overreact to the single things that happen. And as you heard Kalen DeBoer say in the post USC video that they put out, they're playing for the long haul. And in order to be able to do that effectively, they've all got to be on board. They've all got to be present in every single moment, whether that's game planning or doing treatment or, being locked in at practice or whatever. And then that manifests on game day. That manifests in a team that has a different level of synchronicity, a team that has a different level of poise when it gets hard, because everybody's dealing with hard stuff. Huskies are dealing with injuries. Everybody's dealing with injuries, right? So it's a long answer to basically say that is what has impressed me the most, is that he has gotten a group of 170 human beings to be all in on this, and putting aside like, well, I might not be getting the touches I want, or I might want to do it a different way or whatever. Put all that aside to try to sync up and get this thing undefeated.
No, absolutely. I think that's a really great point, because it's so hard to do that, right? And you don't see that very often at many places around the country, where how many programs, you probably count on one hand the amount of programs where you see that true buy-in year in and year out. And especially coming from the situation that a lot of these players were in beforehand, before Kalen DeBoer and his staff got here. And it's something where you talk to a lot of these players and they say, yeah, and you talk to the coaching staff, and a lot of them will tell you, yeah, before, we got a chance to meet these guys, we didn't really trust them, and we didn't know what was going to happen, because a lot of staff members we've talked to behind the scenes have kind of said, yeah, and they were right to do that, because we were unknown to them. We didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't know what they were going to get from us. And it's really hard to get all those people to buy in. And they did that. And that's really such an impressive thing. And to see how far that they've come this season, just even from last year to this year, we've seen such a massive jump. And you talk about the Arizona State game. Kalen DeBoer said it himself that last year, we don't know if we win that kind of game. Mm-hmm. I feel like that really does speak to just everything that has happened in this program in just over the span of a year and a half. And, before we're going to come back and we're going to rank your top 5 favorite games that you've ever called during your time as the Huskies broadcaster.
All right.
But first, we're actually going to be talking about our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the most fun that you can have, winning up to 25 times your money this football season. And now you can also play during basketball season too. All you have to do, you select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. Prize Picks is also the only daily fantasy sports platform that offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured for all football and basketball games. If you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second half, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks, again, is the only daily fantasy sports platform with that insurance policy. PrizePicks is also really simple to play. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. And it now also offers Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. You want to get on the action? Go to prizepicks.com/lockdowncollege and use code lockdowncollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/lockdowncollege and use code lockdowncollege for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks is daily fantasy sports made easy. And now Lars Hanson is here with us too. Lars, welcome to the program. That was really fantastic chat that Tony and I got to have about just Kalen DeBoer and the Husky football program. I know you jumped in for the last minute or so of it there, but Tony, that was really great. And now I think we're gonna have a lot of fun because Lars and I have both just been around this team for a long time, and as have you. And you being the radio voice of the Huskies for so long, we want to know, doesn't have to be just football. What are the top 5 favorite games that you have called during your time as the Husky broadcaster? We'll start at 5 and we'll count down from there.
Oh, well, gosh, I don't know that I could get the top 5 right in an order. I would say like 5 in an echelon that are all tied for first place. Like we could try to go that way. It's impossible to say I called a Rose Bowl and not have that be in the group. Although at the same time, not one of the best games, right? Like, kind of disappointing. Taylor Rapp wasn't there. He had opted out of the game or was banged up, one or the other. And Dwayne Haskins was kind of able to do some work for Ohio State over the middle. So not one of the best games, but I mean, how could you possibly not put calling a Rose Bowl in that list? And then the last 2 Oregon games easily slot in. I mean, there's just no question about that. And now it's starting to get, it's a crowded room now with a lot of other options, right? If I got to start to include basketball as well and not make this just a football thing, I got to give a nod to Dominic Green and the 3-pointer he hit to beat Arizona. That's, just an all-time special moment to be part of. And then the next one that comes to mind for me is a personal one, and it's that I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and I got to call the Washington Huskies at the NCAA tournament in Nationwide Arena, where I walked around as an intern trying to get Columbus Blue Jackets sound bites, and I had my parents and my sisters, 10 rows behind me while I was calling that game, and that's just a personal deal where it's like, well, it was 2 games, right? We beat Utah State before losing to top seed North Carolina. But, just on a personal level, it couldn't get much better than that for me. So, I'd say those are the 5 that jump off the page. But, there are other memorable games for sure. And I'd say this past weekend at the Coliseum was definitely one of them.
Lars, there anything you think that that might stand out for you?
Well, I was going to say, I think the second half of the Rose Bowl for sure was an incredible game. I mean, I think the first half, Bush Hampton was still working through some things, and I think that was kind of symbolic of that whole 2018 season. But I mean, Tony nailed it right on the head. I mean, you can't pick 1 through 5 or 5 through 1 because as this program has gone along and Tony's been able to call these games, there's too many good ones to choose from. I mean, you could probably put USC at 5 because it's the most recent, and the Oregon games are probably 1 and 2. But Arizona, I mean, that Arizona basketball game really was a program changer at that point in time. So now again, the last couple of years might have tainted that from some fans' perspective, but you can't take away in the moment what that meant. And I remember watching that. Dom was in the corner, just nailed it from the corner 3. I was like, wow, just that. I've never seen Heck Ed as loud as I saw it that night. Now, again, I'm relatively young. I'm sure plenty of people will say, "What about this game in 2004?" I'm like, I wasn't there for that. Sorry. Like, I'm not. I haven't been around that long. So, yeah, all 5 of those 1 through 5, you could make your choice.
And I would say if we're going to do an honorable mention list, a kind of, it's easy to not have this jump off the page in the basketball realm, but Coach Hop's first year, people always forget the games in November and December. Winning at Kansas is unbelievable. Like the fact that they did that in his first year, and it was like the team's 9th game in the Coach Hop era. That was a unbelievable win. They were like something like a 20-point underdog or whatever, and they didn't just beat Kansas; they housed them in Kansas City. I mean, that was incredible. And then from a football perspective, not just an Apple Cup, but an Apple Cup in the snow in Pullman, where the winner goes to the Pac-12 championship game, 2018. Myles Gaskin, an 80-yard run to seal it. Guys doing snow angels on the field after the game. That's a surreal scene. And then the following week, actually winning the Pac-12 championship against Utah. But guys, another one that, again, much like we talked about, the Kansas game can get buried a little bit. On the football side, a game that I'll never forget as the We're Back game with Kalen DeBoer had to be the home game against Michigan State. And just how loud that place got, and the 22-0 lead, and particularly when Michigan State had the ball, they're trying to change the play. Huskies are pinning their ears back. Voight Tanufi, ZTF, kind of crunching Peyton Thorne. Michigan State's just disoriented with the noise and the pressure, and I just thought that was incredible. They were ranked 11th at the time, and obviously the program hasn't been that since. But that was a statement game that I'll always remember as well.
I couldn't agree more with you on that perspective. And then I'm really glad you mentioned not only the Kansas game, because that one really was just such a fantastic memory for, I'm sure, a lot of Husky fans early in the Mike Hopkins era, and then the Apple Cup as well, because that was your first season with the football team, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I feel like that was the call that really, because especially following Bob Ronda is not an easy thing to do for any way that you look at it. And I just remember seeing all over Twitter after your call, especially of the Myles Gaskin touchdown that sealed the game, that everyone was like, yeah, we love Tony. We're so glad he's here. And of course, everybody loves you right from the start. But that one was just like, yes, we are all in with this guy. We are so happy to have him here and have him as part of this team. And especially, seeing the Rose Bowl and a Pac-12 championship in your very first year, I'm sure that was all just a wonderful experience for you.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. That's nice of you. I appreciate that. I think the thing that is funny from a play-by-play perspective, and just someone that I've called play-by-play for over a decade at different places, and I care about my craft and I study it, and I try to be the best I can. Those huge moments are never the calls I'm proud of, right? It's just pure emotion, just reacting to an incredible moment. It's not Bob Costas or Vin Scully waxing poetic in a moment. It's just straight reaction and emotional reaction. And I think that's what's fun about it, is we're all in it together. We all want this team to succeed. And so, hopefully my excitement is just all it is an avatar that you multiply by 2 million people, or however big Husky Nation really is, right? It's just, we're all feeling the same thing. So that's the big play. But I think, from a play-by-play standpoint, there are other games that were losses that I just really relished having the opportunity to do. That first game, that very first game at Auburn. I know it was in Atlanta, but special game for me. Yeah, it stinks they lost, but just my first game as a Husky. I'll never forget that, and how big it was, a top 10 matchup. Talks about the Rose Bowl being a loss, and then there were some basketball losses that I feel the same way about. That NCAA tournament team, they went to Gonzaga, number 1 team in the country, and lost on a buzzer beater. They lost by 2 points, and that's just as high a level of a basketball game in an elite environment that you can possibly have. So, we always want to win. There's no question. You always want the Huskies to win. But I think there's a part of me that has kind of I don't know. I used to, as a fan, get all bent out of shape about this person didn't play well, or they made this mistake, or this coach did that, or whatever. I just don't feel that way anymore. Now it's just gratitude for the opportunity to get in some of these incredible environments, and sure, disappointed if they lose, but I still have fond memories of losses, just because of how great some of these environments are and how great Husky Nation is, that it's still just such a memorable experience.
Tony, this has just been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on here with us today. We hope we can have you back again soon.
Yeah, guys, anytime. Appreciate you having me on, and go Dogs.
Thank you so much. And thank you once again to our good friend Tony Castricone for taking that time to jump on with us. That was really, really great. And before Lars and I talk about what Washington's biggest challenge against Utah might be, we are going to take a second here and talk about our good friends over at FanDuel, because you can score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's right. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. All right, Lars. Now it's just you and me. This has been a really fun show. We've gotten a lot of different looks. We're showing the defense a whole lot of different things today. We got me and Tony to start, all three of us in the middle. Now just you and me to finish it out. This has been a lot of fun. So Washington has another ranked matchup coming up this week against Utah. By the time people are listening to this, they will know where both these teams sit in terms of the college football playoff rankings. We will also be doing a live reaction to that later tonight. So hopefully you either tuned in for that video live or have watched that one as well. But going against a ranked Utah team, wherever they might be coming up, what do you think that the biggest challenge is going to be for the Huskies?
I think it's going to be replicating the success the offensive line had against USC, because to what we said earlier in the week, where the offensive line looks like it's solidified. It looks like that's kind of like this is the group you're running with, right? Which you are. But the problem is everybody looks great when you play against Alex Grinch and that trash defense. So when you're now facing Kyle Whittingham, who is a much more seasoned coach, even more so than Lincoln Riley, right? Just because of how long he's been a head coach and been around that program. That's not a shot at Lincoln, by the way. Lincoln is a problem down in USC, but with Kyle built on defense, obviously they don't have Cam Rice, they don't have Brent Kuthi, the tight end, but they still have plenty of pieces there to where you got to take them seriously. And I mean, their offensive line, as I said, it's not great, so you should be able to get some defensive pressure. So between the defense continuing that four sack performance against USC, get 2 or 3 against Utah, control the run game, put some pressure, and then allow the offense to go. Because Utah's defense is good, but they can get got. Jalen Johnson isn't on this defense. Clyde Phillips III isn't on this defense. I mean, maybe he is. I don't think he is, though.
He's not.
But right, exactly. So there's not those true weapons outside that you're kind of worried about, like Rome Odunze going against Jalen Johnson. Not that Rome couldn't win that one, but that's where I'm like, okay, that's at least a possession or two right there where that's going to be a little challenging, and it's a better Utah team that we face, but it's still a top 15 Utah team. So it's not anything to sleep on, but it's certainly one at home where you should be able to rise to the occasion and probably win by 5 or at least by a possession, 7 points, 5 points, somewhere in that range, if not more.
Right. No, it's absolutely possible. And that's why. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because the biggest thing for me is finding defensive success, right? Where we've seen the defense, it's very hard to defend a Lincoln Riley offense. We saw that. Like Chuck Morrell talked on Monday about just kind of tipping his cap after that leaf flicker with Zachariah Branch, Caleb Williams. That was, and it's also not the first time he's run that. I saw something that he ran that once during his time at Oklahoma, but it's still genius, right? That was a fantastic play call, and that's really hard to defend. But there were other issues, and the main thing, in my opinion, being the run defense. And the run defense can solidify itself. And this is going to be a big test of that. Because if you can find a way to shut down Utah's run game, then you're going to be totally fine, I think, on the defensive side. Because Oregon State is also a really good running team. And if you can find some success against Utah, I think that it can be replicated against Oregon State. But I think that one of the main things that we need to note here on the defensive side is just kind of getting after the quarterback, which is something you talked about. And we talked to Zion Tupuola-Fatui on Tuesday during just some press availability. And one of the things that he and I spoke about was he talked about that during the Oregon game, it kind of clicked for him as a pass rusher. And I feel like since then, we haven't necessarily seen him. Well, he had a sack and a half against USC. Well, that's really the only time we've seen him like actually get the numbers. He just kind of said, yeah, the jumping like offsides was something I was definitely like doing a little bit too much and trying to jump the snap. And while he was still really good at that, he kind of acknowledged the fact that what that opens up on the interior in terms of letting a quarterback escape and run. He said, yeah, I know I needed to stop doing that as much as I was. So that was really interesting to know. And then I think that, that kind of translates to Braylon Trice too, right? Where if those two guys continue to get going, because we saw them at, say what you will, even though they gave up 42 points, the pass rush was there. The pass rush did enough to help win that game and help pressure Caleb Williams. But I think that going forward, until Cam Ward against Washington State, you're not necessarily going to see what I would call stellar quarterback play. You'll see some solid quarterback play, especially depending on which DJ Uiagalelei we see against Oregon State. But it's not going to be Caleb Williams. It's not what Bo Nix has been this year. It's not going to be at that level. So can the defense, as we've said all year, it doesn't need to be great. It doesn't need to be good. It just needs to do enough. And I think that against this Utah offense, which has been subpar this season, that they can do enough.
Right, and I mean, just looking quickly at the Utah rushing stats, to your point, they've only been held under 100 yards against two teams, Oregon State and Oregon.
Right.
So, and one of those, Jaquindon Jackson didn't play, and he had 111 and a touchdown against Arizona. Again, Arizona being what it is, but so it's certainly it's more of a running-based offense this year because you don't have Cam Rising. Now, if you put Cam Rising in this offense, now you're getting tested if you're Washington's defense because right now the game plan has to be just sell out to stop the run. If you get beat over the top, or if you get beat in your cornerbacks, so be it. Because if you look at the roster, there's no Brian Thompson. There's no who was the receiver back in the day? It was Ennis, right? Solomon Ennis, I think.
I was a big Tim Patrick guy when he was at Utah personally, but yeah, right. There's a whole line of guys you can go through.
Right, but there's been none of them are on this year's team, right? And that's not a shot at the receivers on the team, but because it just seems like this is more of a running offense. And I think also with Kuthi being out, that's kind of the big one for me. Right? Like if you have him as a release valve, that at least helps out the quarterback a little bit. So to not have either of those guys, you can sell out to stop the run if you're Washington. And if you get beat in the passing game, so be it. I think that the one way you can't, it's almost like if you're losing to Oregon, you can't lose it on Bo Nix's legs, right? Like, he's going to run. Same with Caleb Williams, right? Like, Caleb's going to do magic, but you can't let, like, design keepers and, let him run for 120, right? Because if you do that means you lost contain and you lost the game. So if you can sell it to stop the run, that really is game plan 1 and 2 if you're Washington, and then 3 and 4 just come into play if for some reason, Utah is able to just air it out on you. But I think even at that rate, you would almost rather take that result than getting run over, because when you get run over, there's a different level mentality-wise where, wow, we can't get any pressure. We're losing the line of scrimmage. We're getting overpowered, right? There's a difference between getting overpowered and a couple of shot plays here and there going against you, right? I think that's right. If you're Washington, you allow the shot plays, you don't give up the runs, because if you give up the runs, now everything else opens up.
Right, and I think that a lot of that just kind of has to do with the quarterback play we've seen this year, right? Because you talk about Cam Rising just not being part of this offense. That's a huge factor that we need to consider throughout all of this, because it's tough to, because the quarterback play we've seen from Utah this season has been, I don't want to bag on it too much, but it's been subpar at best. Like, truly, like that's just kind of the reality of the situation, and that does give Washington an opportunity to kind of figure itself out defensively. But I know we've also said that before. We said that against Stanford, and that was not pretty. We said that against Arizona State, and there were times where it looked fine, and there were times where it looked not so fine. So the question is, what are you going to do to just kind of say, because over these last 3 weeks, which are going to be huge for this team, when it comes to the college football playoffs. It comes to everything else. It's going to be huge if this team wants to make that run and wants to make it into those Final Four. How are you going to respond, and what are you going to do to fix issues, whether it be schematically, whether it be, let's try a little bit of a different run fit here. What are you going to do to fix that?
Right. And to your point, if I ask you right now, how many 300-yard passing games does Utah have this season?
I'm going to say 1. Yeah, I was being somewhat generous. I thought maybe against Florida.
235 against Southern Cal was the most they've had this season. They haven't even had over 250. But here's the key. 11 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. So they're not necessarily costing themselves. That's why they're still a top 15 team because, it's not great. It's not sexy by any stretch of the imagination, but it gets you wins, right? Almost like the Arizona State game for Washington, where it didn't look anywhere near as good, but you still got the result you wanted at the end of the day with the victory. And to be fair, that's all that matters, right? You can win. Yep. You can be 7-1 and win every game by 2 points, and you're still 7-1. So it's certainly not a game Washington's going to take lightly, but it's also certainly a game to where I can see why the spread's 9.5.
Right. And Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all the Everydayers out there for tuning in. This was a really fantastic episode where, again, like we can't say enough to thank Tony for his time. That was really fantastic. We are hoping to get him back on again. We're going to have some other guests on at some point, over the next few weeks, few months, whatever it might be. So stay tuned for all that. And, if you're not an everydayer and you want to make sure that whenever some of these guests come on or whatever it is that we do, if you like Lars and I, you want to call them ramblings, you call them what you will. We have a lot of fun with the show, and we really hope that we can get as many of you involved as we possibly can. Feel free to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We are there. We are everywhere. We'd love to get involved with you guys as much as we can. So please follow us on Twitter, ask us a question there, ask us questions in the comments, like the show, leave us a 5-star review. And again, make sure you hit that follow, subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Thursday.